I am celebrating today along with every single survivor of sex trafficking, sexual exploitation, women who have been exploited through image-based abuse, because Andrew Tate was taken off of Spotify today. Woo! Yes. Who's Andrew Tate? I don't even want to give him any kind of publicity. Basically, he had a course on Spotify called PhD, Pimps and Hoes Degree, where he taught men how to traffic women, how to exploit women, especially by the means of a webcam, meaning image-based abuse. And why am I so interested in this? Because that is what happened to me. It's called Romeo-style trafficking. And it's where Andrew Tate's words, and this is also what happened to me, is the trafficker, who you don't see as a trafficker. You just see a man that's like very into you more than anybody else has ever like been interested into you, right? He's just like put you on this pedestal. And the goal is to make you idolize him. Make you look at him like he is God himself, where if he is removed from your life, you will die. And Andrew Tate even says that in several interviews and on his lovely course that has now been removed. He talks about how the goal is to get the woman to want to commit suicide at the mere thought of losing you. So, in honor of this celebratory moment where we are removing predators from online platforms, I want to share with you my testimony, my story that Stop Sis had me on. Stop Sis stands for Stop Suffering in Silence. And it was the very first time I ever shared my story in an interview. I wrote a book about it, Portal Tears, Drowning the Demons Beneath the Fat to Keep the Weight from Coming Back. The story about how I got into the best shape of my life and was then groomed by a sexual predator, a sex trafficker, who was a true crime producer, someone I knew, someone I trusted, and what my whole mission behind this is so you understand what grooming is, what grooming looks like, what trafficking and exploitation actually looks like. It is no longer being pulled into a white van by a stranger, by someone you don't know, right? Taking you from a dark alley. No, it is someone that you know, that trusts you, that grooms you. Or it's somebody that you start dating. It's someone whose mission from day one is to get you to do whatever they want you to do because you trust them so much and you feel like you're going to die if you don't lose them. It's also why I have such a mission to make sure that every woman knows that there is only one Savior you will ever have in your entire life, and that is Jesus Christ, who died on a cross for you. He shed blood for you. That is a love that no man can ever give you. And once you understand that, you will stop looking for the Savior, the knight in shining armor to come and rescue you. So, I can't wait for you to watch this interview that I did with Rachel Timothy and Denise Walsh on Stop Sis. And if you want to order my book, Steve is my amazing audiobook producer. Put the link to Portal Tears up there so they can order the book and you can start talking about it with your girlfriends, talking about it with your daughters, so that you understand what grooming looks like and what sex trafficking actually looks like. You will be shocked when you read my book, when you hear my interview that you're going to hear in just a couple minutes. It's not going to sound like what you hear in the movies, the Hollywood version. So stay tuned.
Hey, 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 you guys. Welcome back to another episode of Stop Suffering in Silence. My name is Denise Walsh, and I'm here with co-host Rachel Timothy. And as you can see, in between us is our beautiful guest of today. And I'm super excited to hear more about her story and her healing journey. She even has a book already on Amazon called Portal Tears. Drowning the demons beneath the fat to keep the weight from coming back. And she says that when Mr. Death gave her the shocking news at age 33 that she was destined to die young, she made it her mission to prove this fateful prediction wrong. She endured 6 years of infertility treatments, including 11 embryo transfers on the path to the birth of her baby girl. She refused to let that little girl face a motherless future. After hard work and many leaps of faith to reach her goal of losing 80 pounds, she began to drown the demons beneath each layer she shed. In her transformational memoir, #1 best-selling author and host of the Potty Mouth Preacher podcast, our guest takes you on her messy, funny, heartbreaking, and inspiring journey of recalibrating her soul and reshaping her body to finally believe that she is worth it. And we are super excited to connect with her today. So big Stop Sis welcome to Lisa Czak.
Thank you so much for having me. I just feel so blessed to be here. And my head is exploding with you reading that Amazon description because I'm thinking, oh, wow, I need to update that. Because so much healing has happened since I wrote that. I was only owning one part of my story, which was me getting in the best shape of my life. Interwoven through that story was how I was sexually exploited, sex trafficked by an executive producer. After that, it's in the story, yet this, honestly, you guys, this is the first time I've shared my story on a platform like this. Meaning this part of the story.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how there's pieces of our stories that we can feel a bit more comfortable with, but it's truly when we own the whole totality of our story that full healing happens. So,
right. My mind is just blown away right now because I remember that woman that wrote that, and it wasn't that long ago, right? But I remember her, and I even had a coach who helped me write it because I had so much healing. I had just writing the book alone. Rachel, you can relate to this, right? Just writing the book alone was ripping open wound after wound. And even what I call scabs, right? I thought I was healed, but there was a big old scab there that we needed to rip off. And even my podcast is now called Worthy Woman Healing. All of it.
Yeah, things have evolved. That's for sure.
So many things have just changed because the weight loss, and it wasn't always that way, right? Like I had lost 80 pounds, and that alone, like the shame of being overweight, obese, was just literally weighing me down, right? And I think back to when I had a hard time even admitting that, right? And so I got through that layer of it. And then I remember I wrote that book, and I kept saying to my book coach, are you sure I should put this in there? He's going to come after me. You don't understand what I'm dealing with here. Well, she did because she read the book, right? She read all the drafts too. Rachel, I don't know how many drafts you wrote, but like that first draft, I felt was a brain dump it was a big part of my healing journey. It really was. And that's why reading your book, Rachel, I was like, wow, I felt like you were reading my mind at times. I did. And you actually jarred a memory for me. It's actually in the book, but for some reason I never connected it. Yeah. So this person that did this to me, I thought to myself, well, I was never sexually abused. I was never as a child, right? I had a good childhood. Nothing ever happened to me. Hello? That something did happen to me. When I was 17, no, I wasn't even 17. I was 16 and he was 19. And it was at a drive-in. And it's in the book actually, but I don't know what went on in my brain, even writing the book, that I just kind of dismissed it. I was like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal, or right. And so like the brainwashing that
trauma bond started back when I was 16. So it's no wonder, because it's haunted me. Even my husband has asked me, why him? Like, I knew he was a weasel. That's what my husband said. I knew, like, they never got along. It's someone that I knew, right, since high school. We even went to marriage therapy, and the marriage therapist, it was a disaster, by the way, because he didn't understand trauma. He just like re-victimized me. It was horrible. But he kept saying, why him? Why did you choose him? Like, it was a choice, right? And it was you, Rachel, it was in your book when you talked about what happened with the coach. And then later it happened as an adult again, that I was able to kind of put that together.
So for you, it sounds like there was an incident when you were 16. But then tell us a bit about the producer, and then also if you feel like those things impacted the weight gain in the first place.
Probably, right? That's another piece to this. Did we just lose Rachel?
We did. She'll come back.
Like, Rachel. Okay, so the weight gain. So a part of the book is about my infertility journey, right? And when you go through infertility, you're getting a lot of shots, and you're getting a lot of, hormone disruptors, right? You're just kind of, your body is just kind of all over the place. And so I attribute the weight gain, a lot of it, to that. But when I look back in my childhood, I was modeling, right? Talk about a setup for an eating disorder, body image issues. And it's like, I was never thin enough, never thin enough.
So as a teenager, you were in modeling. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And I always had a tendency to gain weight, right? Or emotionally eat. That was always my tendency. And so if I look back at my life, I can see very clearly the times when I wasn't doing well emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, mentally, all of it, because I have extra weight on my body. Or if I was super thin, like I went through a phase where I got super thin because I was modeling and I was in New York City, and you're never thin enough. You're never thin enough. There was also an incident that happened with John Casablanca because I was with his agency, and I was like, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? And I thought I left that behind, but then I became a mom, and I just feel like my body just had a hard time adjusting again, right? Just being normal again. And then just the stress of being a mom. It's almost like after you go through infertility treatments, people will say, what are you complaining about? You wanted this. Why are you so upset that you didn't sleep last night, or that she's crying all night, right? And so it just kind of adds layers to whatever it is you're going through, because you feel like you're not allowed to express your feelings, express who you are. And that was a big part of my journey growing up too, right? I always heard, shh, people are listening. People can hear you. Okay. I was like silence.
So I want to hear a bit more about how did you get into modeling to begin with? Because that's not something that I would say most people have experienced.
So I guess I'm trying to think. I was a friend of mine in high school was going to this. Her name is B. Carpenter. I don't know if she's still out there, but she said she was going, and it was kind of like to build confidence, because I was a super shy kid. I didn't speak up for myself, like, at all. Like, on the bus ride to home from kindergarten, the bus driver passed by my house, and I just sat there and cried. I did not tell the bus driver, you just passed by my house. I ended up back at the bus yard. So I just didn't have a voice. So my parents put me in this B. Carpenter. It was like she didn't even call it modeling. I don't know.
How old were you?
Raising. That was probably junior high, like around 8th grade.
Okay. So the goal of the modeling was not necessarily because your parents were into show business or anything like that. It was really about building your confidence and getting you to kind of be able to stand up on stage and talk to people and that kind of thing. So how was that full experience for you?
Well, that's the thing. What you just said, get up on stage and talk to people, it only silenced me further, because you don't talk as a model. And I wasn't even allowed to smile. They'd say, they'd yell at you and they'd say, stop smiling, you're taking away from the clothes. This isn't about your smile, this is about the clothes. So there I was, right? And then I got really skinny. I would survive on like lettuce and Diet Coke because, you're never skinny enough.
How many years did you do the modeling?
I did that all the way until I moved to New York City when I was 19 to be with John Casablanca Agency. And so I did that. And then it was like 2021. And my husband followed me out there. We were dating at the time. And I was like, no, I don't want you to come because I want to do this on my own, that kind of thing. And when I was in the bathroom with another model changing and John Casablanca came in and he started groping her and tried to grope me, I grabbed her and he tried to lock the door and somehow, I don't even know how I got away. I think it was God. And I said, okay, this isn't what I want anymore. This is not what I want anymore.
Okay. And how old were you at that time?
I was 20.
Okay. So in 8th grade, you started modeling kind of for fun, but apparently you liked something about it because you continued to pursue it, moved to New York at 19 to 20, 22-ish, had that negative experience. Is that the producer experience or was there another one?
No. And that wasn't even, that was part of it. But I kept saying to myself, I'm more than this, right? I can't just be judged for the outside. And what I really wanted to do is to get into counseling. They didn't have coaching back then, right? Psychology. And I heard things like, why do you want to work with crazy people? And I wanted to help women. I remember from a very young age wanting to do that. I remember getting books out of the library and I just got negativity, right? Why do you want to work with crazy people? And I was thinking, aren't we all a little crazy, right? Don't we all have, I'm like looking around at my family. Aren't we all a little nuts? I mean, really? So that's really what I wanted to do. And so that's what I did when I got out of modeling. Then I got into psychology, went to college for psychology and got married when I was 21. We got married young and, finally kind of stepped into what I wanted to do. And in between then, that producer, so we were friends. We went to high school together. He knew my family.
The producer?
My family knew him. Yeah.
Okay.
And he was in my brother's grade. And my family liked him. My brother liked him. He was very popular at high school. And I never understood what we were, though, right? Like that incident happened. And then I get to school and he acts like nothing happened. And he was very much about building me up, tearing me down, building me up, tearing me down. Oh. I never knew what to expect. Is he going to ignore me today? Is he going to lavish me with attention? Is he going to whisper something in my ear as we're walking away, right? But then he'd have girlfriends and he'd tell me these horrible things, like this one girlfriend went through a lot of sexual abuse. And he kind of like fed into that, but he would share all this stuff with me. I never knew what we were, right? I'm like, are we dating? Are we not dating? But it was like this weird.
There was an emotional string for sure. Oh, and yeah. I didn't quite realize that the producer was the same person as the 16-year-old situation, which means when he comes back into your life, there's still that emotional string.
Right. And he obviously wasn't a producer back then, right? Because he was in high school, but he was really supportive and encouraging about me modeling. He'd always say, you have the it factor. Not many people have it. You have the it factor. Mm-hmm. You're going to be a star, Lise, right? He would say all of these things like that. Very encouraging about it.
Or could we call that, what is it called? Love bombing?
Yes. But I didn't have the words back then, right?
Right.
And my husband even asked me once, well, did you date him? I'm like, I don't know. Like, that's the honest answer. I don't even know what you would call it. I didn't have a word for it, right? And I didn't understand why I would keep going back because the attention was so great and he listened to me. Like I could tell him anything. And that was for me, for little Lisa, right? Oh my gosh, somebody's actually listening to me and saying it's okay if I have like even just like bad thoughts in my head, right? It's okay to say these out loud. So that was a big thing. You know, we would just talk and talk and talk. But then, like I said, he'd go silent or he'd be super cruel.
Mm-hmm.
Or he'd walk by
Yeah.
with his girlfriend, like his girlfriend would come up and like get in my face. What's going on here?
Intermittent reinforcement is the strongest
Right.
form of reinforcement, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like the love, I love you, I hate you. And there's this
Mm-hmm.
emotional string that makes us go, how can I get more of the love bombing? How can I get more of that positive
Mm-hmm.
attention? How can I get
Right.
more? And then if we're not getting it, then it's like, what did I do wrong? And what do I need to change and do so I
Mm-hmm.
get more of the attention that I want? So that's an emotional and mind roller coaster in and of itself. And oftentimes we find that we change who we be so we can
Mm-hmm.
work to try to get that positive reinforcement. And so it sounds like even as years went on, that emotional string was still strong. So
No, that's the weird thing. So that's the weird thing. I went out there with my husband for my brother's wedding, and they actually got into a fight. They got into it. He drove us, the producer guy, he drove us to this really seedy bar downtown. It's still there, actually. And I was like, what is this? What? It was me, my husband, and my friend that got me into modeling. We were there. And the producer guy said, what are you doing with this, little Christian goody goody guy? This is not the guy for you. This is not who I want you to be with. It was like a big fight, right? And so then he left us there. And that was back, we didn't have cell phones back then. That was that was 1980, 1989 or something. There's no cell phones, right? And I was like, oh my God, he just left us here.
yeah.
And then he came back and we went to my friend's house because we were staying there and everyone got out of the car. And I said to Denny was my fiance. Was he? No, he wasn't my fiance. He was my boyfriend. So I said to him, I just want to stay behind and talk to him. And Denny got really mad and he said, fine. He slammed the car door and he hit me. He didn't mean to. Like it wasn't like and it hit me. And so then the producer guys, see, Mr. Christian boy, look at his temper. Look at what he just did to you.
Isolation, love bombing, lots of, we can see when it's obviously easier to look back and see all of those red flags.
Right.
But at the time it's confusing because you're like, does he really care? I thought he cared. I thought this was a relationship. I thought we were friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened with, you said this is the first time you've ever really shared the producer piece of your story.
I did. So the crazy thing is, I guess it was 20 some years went by. There was like no contact at all. I swore him off. I was like, nope. Right. I was resolute with it. Nope, nope, nope. However, I might sound crazy saying this, but I'm going to say it because I know, Rachel, I read that part in your book where people might not believe me. They might think I'm crazy. So because of your courage, I'm sharing this. It's also in my book. I kept having this reoccurring dream that I would meet him on a street. I didn't know. In the dream, it felt like it was New York City, right? And it kind of like a cobblestone, old kind of feeling. Low buildings, though, not high buildings. And he'd take me up to this place, and it was a very dark, narrow hallway. And we would go into this tiny little space that had white lights and children's artwork all over. That was the dream. It wasn't like sexual. It wasn't like, oh, we get together. But I kept having it over and over again. And I never understood it. I was like, God, what does this mean? Well, I don't know what this means, right? I tend to, now I realize, God warns me. God sends me warnings a lot of times in dreams or like, not to sound cuckoo, like visions, like a flash. I can't even describe it's not like a vision. It's just like a flash, right? in the past, I took it as, oh, this is meant to be. This is something I'm supposed to do. When really it's a warning, right? Like this, something's coming. Prepare yourself, that kind of thing. And so I kind of forgot about that dream. So flash forward to my daughter was like 10. Remember, we went through a lot of infertility. My husband was like, we agreed, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom. Nothing will ever change that, until I'm ready to go back to work. I wanted to raise her. It was 6 years of infertility, all those shots, everything I went through. We were like, nope, this is what we're going to do. Then he had a family business and his family business shut down. But I didn't know any of this was happening. So my daughter's tuition was due and it didn't go through. I was like, oh, this is weird. So I go to look at, the bank account. Like, where's all the money? What is going on here? So I go to him, what's going on here? And he said, I don't know when or if I'm going to get another paycheck. I was like, okay. And I was in mama bear mode though, because we had my daughter in this private Catholic school and it was a family to us. It was our church family. It wasn't just a school. And he was saying, we'll just put her in private or public school. Our nephews are fine there in public school. And not even all the crazy stuff that's going on now was going on back then, right? In public school. Maybe it was, I just didn't know it. But I knew, I was like, no, I have got to do something. So I went to her principal the next day crying, sobbing. And I said, I'll do anything. I'll do anything at this school. Please, what can I do? So she handed me a stop sign and a reflective vest. And she said, and because I was in good shape, there's a whole chunk there. Remember, I lost 80 pounds. I was in the best shape of my life. She's like, we've never had anybody it's usually older people. We've never had anyone that was in good enough shape to stand there and pull the sign in and out. And she said, that will cover your daughter's tuition. Yeah. But I had a lot of sort of anger and resentment about that, right? That's like when our marriage started really unraveling. And I felt betrayed. I felt like, what, and I came home to tell them, my daughter, we laugh about it now. Even my husband, we laugh about it now. I said, I'm going to be a crossing guard to pay tuition. He started laughing, assuming I was kidding. Well, I was not kidding. And she said, Mom, do you have to take the lowliest job in school? So at that time, right, then I was just feeling like, oh, whoa, what am I doing here? I'm doing all this for what? Anyway, so what?
I feel like this is such a key thing because predators have a tendency to take action whenever they sense a vulnerability. And since you and your husband were struggling, I feel like that was a little bit of a crack where he could weasel his way in and begin to cause destruction.
Exactly. I say that I had a crack in my spiritual foundation and it was a sliver at first, right? And he cracked it wide open. And so this is something that haunts me. Like, I wish I could tell you he reached out to me. That's not what happened though. It haunts me. It still bothers my husband to this day, right? If I could go back and change one thing, it would be don't do it. But I'll never forget. I was sitting at our desk in the kitchen. It was like midnight. So I was in Arizona. He was in New York. So it was like 3 a.m. there, right? And I was like, hey, this is Lisa Kowalowski, now Czak, I'm married, just, wanting to say hi. Well, he answered like that. Red flag, why is he up at 3 a.m, right? On Facebook Messenger. But did I see that back then? No. And immediately, he just pounced. Here's my phone number. Immediately, he wanted to get me off of Facebook Messenger. Immediately, he wanted to get me on the phone, like in texting, right? And I trusted him because I knew him. My family knew him. So I just poured out my heart to him. And that's when it all started, right? Because he saw that crack and he said, hey, you know what? I have this little studio apartment here in New York. And why don't you come out? I use it for, actors, actresses, directors, people that come out of town. Why don't you just come out? No strings attached. And at this point, he's just like being really sweet, like a really sweet friend. There's nothing weird going on. However, it's like he's known me his entire life. It's like you would never know that when, almost 30 years or whatever it was had passed, right? It's like he can read my mind. It's like he validates everything. So, you don't deserve this. I told you not to marry him in the first place. Why didn't you listen to me? And there was that little voice that, right? And he'd be walking around the streets of New York, FaceTiming me like all night long. And he said he was married.
You got that attention again.
And I said, he said he was married. And I said, what does your wife think you are? Why are you just wandering around the street? There's so many red flags. And mind you, I was a psychology major, right? It's like that little voice that kept going, maybe he's just not mentally well, right? Like I think something's going, like he's bipolar or something.
Were you living in New York still, or had you moved?
No, we were in Arizona.
Oh, okay.
That's where we got married.
Going to visit New York was a big to-do. Like that's not just you taking a train.
Right. No, I'd have to get on a flight, and he was like, I'll fly you out first class and you can stay at this little place. No strings attached whatsoever. Right. He kept emphasizing that. So I go. It gets even better though. He said, while you're out here, I'll put you on one of my shows. Linda Hamilton is on the show. You'll love her. She's a kick-ass lady like you, right? She's just like a mama bear. And he knows the right words to say. Because I don't want to be an actress at this point, right? I don't want anything, but I do need money. So I'm like, okay, that sounds good. But I wasn't okay right away. Then he started saying like weird things. I'll hook you up with spas and make sure that, you're pampered and taken care of. There's a beautiful French lingerie store right underneath the apartment. I'm sure that you've never had expensive lingerie before. So I decided to tell one of my friends about this. And she goes, Lisa, this sounds pretty womanish. You know that movie? She goes, this is what I'm hearing. No, I was like, are you kidding me? No. And he's married, it's safe. There's nothing weird going on. He just wants to give me a break, because at that point I had stopped the crosswalk job and I became a fitness director at a gym. And I opened the gym at 3 a.m. And because it was a brand new location, I had to do all the training and all the classes. I did talks to potential clients that were coming in at night. So I was gone from 3 a.m. My daughter, I kissed her goodbye at 3 a.m. and I didn't come home sometimes till 10 at night. So I did need a break. Like I was exhausted. So anyway, I went out there and a limo picked me up. Right. And I was like, oh, wow, this is just to be treated this. And he knew that there was money issues, right? He knew exactly what to do because he knew that there were money issues. He knew that, there were me being exhausted, all these things. And sure enough, I could not believe it. I get there and we're on this little street with small buildings, go in a narrow hallway, and the room has the white lights and the children's artwork. I just started shaking. That's the other thing. I always shook in his presence. Even as a teenager, I always shook and I never understood it. I thought it's because, chemistry or whatever, right? Like, oh, but it was like now I realize it was a trauma response I was having.
You are only as sick as your secrets. It is time to stop suffering in silence and join other women who are also on a healing journey, who are being raw, real, vulnerable, and honest with what they are going through in their life, what they have been through in their life. And wherever two or more are gathered, we know God is with us. It says it right there in the Bible. So there is power to group healing. Miracles happen in there. You have one woman sharing, opening up her heart. Suddenly everyone else in the group is saying, yeah, I've experienced that. I'm not the only one. There's such power in knowing that you are not alone in your suffering. You are not alone in your healing. And we meet twice a month. And in between those times, a lot happens, right? And it's important that you have time in between the sessions to practice the healing technique that I teach you, so you can come back into the group and celebrate with the other women. Hey, I actually remembered to do the healing technique in that moment. That trigger didn't derail me anymore. But it's practice. I'm also a personal trainer, right? You don't just get a 6-pack abs by doing one sit-up. You have to keep doing it over and over again. You don't run a marathon. You don't go out and run 13.1 miles for a half marathon the first time, right? You practice running a little bit every day. And that is what we do in Worthy Woman Healing Group. Join today and tell yourself, I'm going to give this a 3-month commitment minimum, because I know I need time to practice outside of these sessions, and come in and get guidance from the other women on how to actually heal all of these wounds, heal my mind, body, and soul, one trigger at a time. You are worth it.
And
do you think that anybody could have talked you out of like sense into you at this moment? Or do you think like you, the trauma mind had been set years ago? Yeah. Yeah.
No. And I often think about that also, right? Because now, like, my daughter's dating, and if I see her with a guy, I'm like, oh, red flag, red flag. It's hard to talk someone out of it. I've talked to her friends also, right? That after the fact, you see the red flags.
Well, what advice would you give a mom? Because we hear from moms oftentimes where girls are in that exact position you're in. There's no talking sense into them. And, you know, some of them are like, nope, this is my rule, and, you know, boundaries and all of that until you follow the rule as far as who you're with and where you go. But other parents are more along the line of, I don't want to lose this relationship because I know when it fails, I need to be there to catch her when she falls, type thing. But what advice would you give moms in that position when their daughter is being swept off her feet by this grooming and love bombing? What would you give?
I actually just went through that with my daughter. Now, this dude was not a sex trafficker. He wasn't any of those things, right? I just saw a lot of red flags. Was he going to exploit her? Probably, right? In some way. And we were just, like we said, we were fighting and fighting and fighting. So what I decided to do is, this is before she started, this is what I would say to moms. Before they even start dating, right? Have them come up with their like standards, right? I'm not going to go below this. And so for my daughter, I shared with her some red flags that I saw, but more importantly, it was like, does he fit in to what you want? Like, she wanted to date. I wish she is here, but she's sick. She'd probably come on and share it. Her thing was, I want to date a godly man. And she was all about purity, right? And so I would just keep reflecting back to her. Okay, is that behavior, is what you did, does that fall in line with your definition of purity? Is this boy bringing you closer to God and Jesus, or further away? That was a huge question to ask, because I saw a light bulb go off. And if somebody said that to me back then, or even as an adult, right? Is he bringing you closer to God, closer to repairing your marriage, or further away? I probably would have stopped, right? And then just
least thought about it. And I think that's the thing. Sometimes we're so just in automatic pilot that we're not making conscious decisions. And so even just to stop and think, and I love that you're not telling her, lecturing her, right? You're getting her to do that introspection, which allows it to be her idea, and the defenses go down at that time.
And I did say things like, okay, if stuff is happening in the house, like say you catch your girl has her, your daughter has her boyfriend over, and you catch them doing something physical, or he's staying late or whatever. It's instead of saying, don't you do that, they're going to do it more. You say, okay, I understand that this is a choice you're making, right? I don't agree with this choice. And if you're going to continue making these choices, then you won't be doing it in my home. And I really don't. And so that might cause them to go, okay, fine, I'll move out. Okay. It's just staying calm, right? Okay. So you want to move out. This isn't the way I pictured you moving out. I pictured us helping you and, doing this in a better way where we're budgeting. And okay, if you really do want to move out, let's go over the expenses that you're going to have to incur and talk about practical things, right? Instead of feeding into their emotional reaction. If you emotionally react, it's like this big explosion. I learned that the hard way.
So you walk into the room that ends up being the exact room of your reoccurring nightmare.
Right. And I think, so then I'm saying to him, oh my gosh, I've been dreaming about this room. And so I'm feeding into it. Like I'm making it even worse for myself, right? Because I'm literally saying, so I tell him all about the dream, and he's like, see, we're soul connected. But remember, at this point, I just think he always presented it like, it's no different than what your big brother, because he knew my brother. It's no different than what your big brother would do for you. That's what I'm doing for you. That's why you're here. That's why I have you out here, right? He's like, okay, but we're not going to stay here. We have to go to where the shoot is going to be. There was always this shoot, and he kept moving me around, like different places. We never stayed in one place. And I never met Linda Hamilton, never met any of the people, right? He knew I was really stressed. So that first night, he gets out, I don't even know what you call it. It's not a vape. Is it a vape? I don't know. I don't know what he had in it. So he's like, just, take a toke of it or whatever. I never did pot growing up. I never did any of that. So I don't even know what. He's like, it'll relax you. It'll relax you. And I trusted him. So I did it. I woke up the next morning wearing an Iowa sweatshirt, no panties, nothing underneath, bleeding. What happened? Oh, nothing happened. You were just really stressed and you just kind of passed out. Okay, but how did I get this on? And how come I have nothing on here? Oh, we got to go. We got to then we'd go to a location in like Chinatown. And then it just kept happening. And I was like, what is going on? I was so confused. And when I came back home and I landed, my daughter and husband were like, what is going on with you, Mom? I was completely spaced. I was not there.
Yeah, you were a shell.
On the plane, he put me back on the plane on first class. And I'm not a drinker. Like I said, I don't really drink. I never did drugs. Suddenly, I'm just like ordering red wine to the point, this was so shameful. The flight attendant looks at me and she goes, honey, this is not going to help. But the shame, right? I'm already feeling shame. I don't really know what happened. I don't understand what happened to me. Yet he's like being super sweet and building me up and, oh, you just got a little crazy because, you're not used to this, or you're not used to that. It just wasn't making sense. I couldn't think straight. Mm-hmm. And then my husband and daughter are like, oh, what happened? Did you meet so-and-so? No, I didn't actually. And that was a legit show. Like that was a legit show that he was working on. But yet I never met any of those people. And then it was the same thing, right? It's like in text, super sweet, super sweet. Then he'd go silent. So when I got back home, though, it was like silence. It was like darkness. And I reached out to my friend and I was like, I don't know what happened. But I kept feeling like there were video cameras. And I thought, okay, I'm just crazy. And I asked him about it, but he was dark, right? But then when he came, so he'd go silent. That was his favorite form of like mind games. Then he'd come back like nothing ever happened. Super sweet. So then I'd ask him, what happened? What happened? Nothing happened. You're safe in my arms, right? Then he started doing weird things. Like he'd say, you're safe in daddy's arms. I was like, what? Why are you referring yourself? Because I'm your daddy. So there's not even little, right? But there's things like that. And then he asked me to send him videos. The very first time he asked me to do a video. And it was a picture, not even a video yet. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. What if you already did? I was like, what? And so he planted these seeds in my head, right? So I refused I said, I'm not sending you any pictures. And then he would just go dark. And then I'd be like, oh my God, what if he has something on me that I don't know about? Right? He was very subtle. It was very insidious. It wasn't flat out, like threats. It was very insidious. And then he started saying things to me like, in New York, you wanted it. He'd say, mommy wanted it.
Wow.
And so it just snowballed from there.
Did you end up ever going back to New York?
I went back 3 more times.
Okay.
And then we moved there because my daughter got into performing arts school there. Oddly enough, this is the weird thing. When I moved there, he left me alone. I don't know if he was nervous because I was there now. And I had an elected position at my daughter's school on the school board, and as PA president of the Manhattan school, you have to do a whole election thing. And so I don't know. But he would still play the mind games. He'd be like, hey, let me take you for dinner. I know your husband can't afford dinner. But then nothing would happen. Like we'd go to dinner, very expensive dinners, $1,000. He'd buy a $300 glass of scotch. You know what I mean? Try this. You never tried this. And nothing would ever happen, no. And so that kind of made me think, maybe I made it all up. Maybe it
Did you ever have what we would consider like flashbacks of just bits and pieces of memories, which is what can make it so confusing because you don't have a linear, this is what happened, especially when drugs are involved?
Yes. So the very first flashback, it was horrible. I had to get a colonoscopy. I turned 50. So when you turn 50, I guess you have to get a colonoscopy. So they give you the drugs, and they told me to lay on my side, with your knees up. So you're on your side and your knees are up. I started vomiting. I started shaking. I couldn't breathe. And I was like screaming out. And I had flashbacks of things being inserted into my butt. It was, and that's when I was like, okay, what is going on with me?
Mm-hmm.
But I still didn't tell anyone at that point, right? I'm having these flashbacks and the doctor, I don't remember what they did, to be quite honest. I think we ended up doing it. I think they gave me more drugs or something, but recovering from that was horrible because then I remembered also coming back from New York once with that same feeling in my rectum. Like I couldn't sit. It hurt so bad to sit. And he's like, I gave you an enema because you were constipated. What?
The doctor said that, or the
producer?
The producer said that. Wow, which is not normal. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, when I first met him, he did these true crime shows, and he was working on a show he said that it was a woman, I didn't know her, that we went to high school with, and she was in real time, as she was having flashbacks of her childhood sexual abuse, he was recording her, and he'd be on the phone like all night with her, listening to these flashbacks that he recorded. And then when the first time I came out to New York, he said, "Thank God for you." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because otherwise I would have effed her." I said, "Excuse me, the sexual abuse woman that you're doing what?" Well, I don't even know what that means. What do you mean, thank God for me? And it just stuck in my brain, right? I couldn't get her out of my head. So after I moved to New York, I can't even tell you why. Because at that point, occasionally we'd have these dinners, right? But he kind of left me alone. I don't know why. God, I'm sure. Again, on Facebook Messenger, because I didn't have her contact information. And all I said to her was, "You didn't deserve what he did to you. You are worth it." That's all I said. She calls me back, sobbing. "Oh my God, did he do it to you too?"
I was going to say, these perpetrators never only have one victim, and it's so scary to think about because they know very well what they're doing. They know the mind games. They know the emotional strings. They know the manipulation.
It was so creepy because we started comparing texts and pictures that he sent. Same exact pictures, same exact words. It's like he just copied and pasted.
Right. And so when did you realize that, like, when did you start the healing journey? Tell us a little bit about that. Because there is this moment of, oh my gosh, this is what happened. And then, you come to realization and then needing to start that healing journey.
Well, it was after that colonoscopy. And then I reached out to a friend of mine, the same friend that got me into modeling, actually. How crazy. And I said to her, "I think I'm being abused, but I don't know." I was sobbing, like I couldn't even talk. I was on the street of New York outside of our apartment, and I'm sobbing. And I said, "I don't think I am anymore. I don't know, though. I don't know. I can't make sense of anything. Can I send you a bunch of texts because she knew him. She never liked him. And like she just didn't trust him kind of way, right? And so I sent her a bunch of texts that I had saved, right? And she said, "You are, absolutely. You need to cut off contact with him. Do not see him again. Don't talk to him again." She said, "This is bad. This is really bad." And that at this point he was doing things. This is the other thing he was doing. Like, I still have the video. He sent me a video of, I'm assuming it's him. It sounded like his voice and it looked like his arm, of a rash they had from head to toe. And he said, "I have a blood infection. Who knows? Could be AIDS, could not." I was like, what? So then at that point, we weren't talking to each other, right? Like, so he was trying to draw me back in, maybe, I don't know. So I started texting him and I said,
Do you think that he was trying to draw you back in, like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And like play the victim
I think
card?
So.
Or was he trying to scare you, like you could also have AIDS?
I think both. I think probably the latter. I think at this point, I'm living in New York. He probably knows I'm onto him, right? He knows that I'm talking to that other victim of his. Because I actually said to him, the last conversation I ever had with him, I said to him, I don't know what you did to her, but I'm going to find out. And he went dark, right? He just went dark. And then he actually contacted her. We found out later he contacted her and said, "Hey, Lisa is a crazy ex-girlfriend from high school. She's going to be reaching out to you with a lot of stories. Don't believe her. She's crazy, and don't believe her. She's mentally unstable." And that was a red flag for her, though. She was like, I never knew her, but I knew her brother, and I don't remember her having that reputation as a crazy girl in high school.
So it was really getting out of your own story and sharing those text messages with someone else that said, this is not okay.
Right.
And then tell us a little bit, and I have a hard stop here, but tell us a little bit about the healing journey of recognizing what you went through and starting to put the pieces together and put your life back together.
For me, the healing journey was really getting back to God. I was so far, because he didn't believe in God, and he put a lot of thoughts in my head about God and Jesus and after you die. And my healing came, I was in the shower after I talked to that woman, after I realized what actually happened to me, and I was scrubbing myself raw. Like, I was bleeding. I was scrubbing myself raw. And I thought in my head, I can't go to Jesus in this state. I'm dirty. I can't go to him dirty. And I heard very clearly, come as you are. Come as you are, and I'll shine a light on where I'm going to take you. So I stopped scrubbing myself, and that is when my healing journey began. That's when I really found God and Jesus, and I made a covenant that day in the shower with God and Jesus that I will turn to. I kept repeating it over and over again. I will only turn to you. I will only turn to you. I will only turn to you. I will never turn to another man, right? I will only turn to you.
That's beautiful. We work with a lot of survivors. And so first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story. It takes a lot of courage and bravery to stop suffering in silence and start healing in community. So thank you so much for sharing. And I feel like we could go in a million different directions. And so I need to have you back on at some point to keep the conversation going, because there's a lot here on grooming and gaslighting and those emotional strings and the old patterns kind of falling right back in line when you see connect with the predator again. But then also what I think is fascinating, and we talk to clients about this all of the time, is it's one thing to forgive a child who's experienced child sexual abuse, to look at yourself as a child and forgive that child and forgive yourself, let go of the shame, all of that kind of stuff. But oftentimes we hear people say it's the adult decisions that can be the hardest to release and forgive and to heal from, because there's that idea of I should have known better, or I should have seen those red flags. But in your story, you hear so much of that manipulation and of that trickery. And, it's not on accident. This is a master manipulator who probably it has hundreds of victims. Who knows, right? And so for those that are listening, I want you to hear the trickery that Lisa experienced, that manipulation, that even as an adult, she didn't go in making, this is what I'm going to do. It was like, I trust this person, and this person betrayed that trust. And so we get to also forgive our adult decisions, and we get to forgive and let go and release some of the things that happened, all of the things that happened as adults, because we were living, we did the best with the information we knew at that time.
I love that. For a long time, I thought I deserved what happened to me, and I thought I wasn't worthy of getting help for a long time. And it was actually my husband that said, no. Nobody deserves to be sold as a sex slave over and over again.
Yeah.
That's not okay. Nobody deserves that. So it's kind of interesting as my husband, because it all happened right under his nose, right?
Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. I feel very safe in this environment. I was very picky. I've been offered to be on other shows, and I was like, I don't know. You're not a survivor. I don't know about this. So,
yeah. Well, I think to a listener, it's so obvious the manipulation that you experienced. But I know going through it, it's very easy to beat ourselves up for those things that we think we should have known at that time, but we didn't know. We didn't know. But now that you know better, right, you are able to share and spread that awareness with others.
Yes. So thank you so much for providing this safe space and just having this out there for a resource for women. Just meeting Rachel was a total God moment. It really was. God's like, here you go.
Well, your healing journey is inspiring. And so thank you for saying yes to yourself, yes to God, and yes to the healing journey, because we always say it feels like you're walking through mud, uphill both ways. But
That's a great
it's worth
description. Oh, wow. Yeah.
But it's worth it.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing today. Thank you, Rachel, for introducing us all. And we'll definitely continue the conversation. If you guys have any thoughts or questions for Lisa, write them in the comments down below. Definitely check out her book and all of her resources. We'll be posting that in the description box along with her podcast. You can continue to get to know her story. Have an awesome night, you guys, and we'll see you
Thanks.
next time.
You too. Bye-bye.